Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people around the world. This is Martin Kubel, your host of the Db2 Night Show, and I've got an extremely special guest today, Piotr Mierzejewski of the IBM Toronto Lab, Director of Db2 Development and AI. This is fantastic. How are you doing today, Piotr?
I'm well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Martin.
Oh, it's fantastic to have you here. We're excited, but it's also a sign of the times that the only way to reach people these days is over the internet. So here we are. And so, as always, I'll get through the formalities and then turn things over to Piotr to hear the presentation. There we are. There's our social media. As we've noted this year, the big change in the last 18 months is we now have our replays on YouTube as well as through downloads in WMV and MP4 format. So those are available. We have our LinkedIn group, and we also have our hashtag Db2Night on Twitter. There's our famous disclaimer. Everything's material is what it is. Trademarks are respected. There will be downloads, and beyond that, life is great, and we're glad you're here. There's our quick announcements. Our next Db2 LUW show will be yours truly doing a presentation I call the Data Pioneer. I put that presentation together when I went into a nice startup doing all sorts of machine learning and AI, and it was really great, and they didn't have a backup. Oops. So from that point of view, I thought it was really good that we talk about setting up new environments. How do you do that when you've got a whole bunch of people using Agile and doing all sorts of development? On the other side, on the mainframe side, we have Mariella Wyrock in 2 weeks talking about high-performance Java applications, and then we finish off our season with Dave Belke speaking on security for the mainframe and keeping up with threats. And after that, we have a stay-home summer, so you have a whole bunch of replays that you can watch. As always, our founding sponsor of the Db2 Night Show is DBI Software, and they would like it a great deal if you would consider looking at their Db2 performance tools for LUW, and they have a link. You can watch a demo online. If you watch the demo, they send you a gift card. They're really nice about them doing that, and it's a really nice demo. Our winner from the last show was Ram Kaza of Cigna. Just for sitting in on the Db2 Night Show, there's a chance to win something, and the gift certificate has been sent out. As always, our sponsors of the show are DBI Software and yours truly, Martin Kubel Consulting. I was mentioning to Peter, the show's been going now. We're in our 11th season, and I think I've been around for about 9 of them. So this has been kind of a Friday morning thing for me to do. I'm glad I know I'm doing the show today. That means it's Friday. It's really hard when you're home all the time. Another thing for our DBI sponsor is here's one of their performance trend charts that they show, showing various performance aspects. And you can change this around, have a look, and see what's happening at any given time, and see not only what the workload was, but what your system parameters were, and anything of that nature which affects performance is noted by DBI. They do a good job on that. All right, moving along. Now we're into our famous polling section. Let me pull those out. I'll launch our first poll, which is the standard questions we always have. What versions of Db2 LUW are you currently running? And this is pick as many as you like. Let's see people all on that new stuff. When I first started doing this show, Db2 8.2.2 was really old, and we still had people running that. So it's nice to see that people are mainly moving along. And we like giving people a chance to quickly vote here. We're up to about 25 seconds, and about half of our audience has voted. I'd like to see that a little higher, but we will leave it open for about another 5 seconds, and we'll close that off and share the results. Today, we see that we have 42% of our audience is on Db2 11.5. That's great news. Of course, percentages are higher than 100 because people can answer twice. And we don't have anybody on 10.1 or older. Yay! That's a good thing.
Well, there seems to be a little bit of 9.7 still around.
Oh, there are people. Oh, there is one there. Yeah, right. There's always somebody. It's always something. Sometimes it's the vendor. You know, sometimes people are. We ran some tax applications from one vendor, and they said, well, we haven't certified anything newer. And so you get into this, and people are afraid to get off the old version. So that's how that type of stuff happens. All right, what other commercial DBMSs are you running? I listed the top 5 here. I could have put in some other mainframe ones, but this is the LUW show, and we care less about the mainframe here.
Yeah.
Getting the voting going on there, and everybody's got lots of everything. You wouldn't want to not have the entire collector series of DBMSs these days. And, gotten about the same percentage of people who have voted, so I'm going to close that off and share that result. Here at more than half our audience are good, loyal IBM people running DB2 on Z. We have Oracle, SQL Server, and the usual other suspects in there. Close that off. The next one we have is, are you using any open source? It's always interesting to find out. And once again, I forgot to change that to be pick them all, so pick your favorite, because I forgot to change that to multiple answers. I promise I'll remember to do that next year at the latest. It wouldn't be a show with it if it didn't have an error in it. So we'll see here it's Mongo, MySQL.
Mongo, yep. And Postgres, yep.
Postgres, Maria. There we go. The last question we have, or 2 more questions actually. Are you building or modifying applications to use AI? AI is still a big thing up there. See where people are on our topic today. About half of our audience has considered and voted. You give another 5 seconds to get a couple more answers in. With that, I'll close that off and share the result. Got some people in production, just a few in production, looking at future implementations. Got some selling to do there, Peter, in terms of AI.
All right.
I was talking to somebody about AI one time, and I said, I took my first course in AI at the University of Toronto back in the fall of 1975.
Oh, wow.
This guy said to me, oh, it's changed a lot since then. I said, I know, I've taken more classes. But it's also interesting how much it changes and how little it changes. That's part of learning. This is an interesting one as well. Just get 1 or 2 more votes in here, people. Here we have, I think we'll just call that a day and share that. We've got 29% people using Docker, 24% using Kubernetes, and then 47% are not yet on containers. So that's kind of interesting to note as well. So 50-50 between the 2 container things almost. And with that, we are out of questions. So I'm going to move along and turn things over to you, Peter. We'll move on.
Thank you. Now, let me just figure out again, how do I start sharing my screen?
Yes, and I have to. I'm putting a message up that you have to accept.
Oh, there we go. Yep. Thank you. I see it.
Yep.
So far, no technical difficulties. This is great.
Oh, we can. The presentation is still young. We can come up with some. But I'm going to mute myself, but I'll jump in if there's any questions on the queue.
Wonderful. So thank you again, Martin, for the introductions, and thank you for everybody that found time to actually listen to this. I hope wherever you are in the world that you're safe in these unprecedented times and getting used to, like myself, to actually delivering this kind of things digitally. This is a third podcast I'm doing over the last week and a half, and it seems that everything from Think Conference to IDAC conferences, at this year at least, everything is moving towards digital. So I appreciate your time. And for today's Tonight Show, there's going to be slightly different format that normally has happened in the past. Looking at the previous sessions, usually we did the deep dives into some specific function, would it be security or pure scale, HADR, of the Db2 engine. Now, with this session, what I would like to do is take it a little bit higher and talk about all this buzz that's been around about Db2 or Db2 being the AI database, and basically what this really means from a perspective of relational warehouse. What does it mean to be AI database ready, enabled, or being infused with AI? Additionally, for the second pillar, I would like to concentrate on the true message of the hybrid cloud and how, even what's becoming even more evident right now with COVID, how no single enterprise is considering just a single form of deployment like traditionally has been done on-prem, but it's actually looking at the mix of the basically hybrid workloads where some of them run in a cloud, would it be as a managed or hosted service or via bring your own license. So with that, we can also cover the new direction of containerization. So thank you, Martin, for the questions. They were put in there both from the AI perspective as well as the containerization perspective. They were put there as per my request. So those were not traditional, but they kind of fit in with the message that I would like to bring forward throughout this webcast. Sorry, podcast. So without further ado, as Martin has mentioned, my name is Piotr Mierzejewski. I'm a director of development for Db2 LUW and hosted in Toronto. So what is this whole hype about being, Db2 being the AI database? For those of you that actually participated in last year Think, you will find that this was one of the main messages that we've been driving. But under the hood, what it really means is that as Db2 organization, we've realized that the whole landscape, how customers access and manage their data, how they actually write and deploy applications has drastically changed. The enterprise's data stores have been evolving over the decades, and as have been the development of basically applications, the technology that has been used. So the previous basically infused with AI, infused with open source. And with that in mind, we have to also transition Db2 into this new modern agent era. So when we talk about Db2 being ready for AI, it's all about creating the ecosystem for the developers and the data scientists and businesses that will allow them to successfully adopt the new technologies, new forms of deployments, new forms of clouds, public, hybrid, and vice versa. And being able to have the database that is actually built out, not for your current needs, but something for the future. So it's all about embracing of the open source, adopting industry standards, delivering all the data and access, essentially all the data at your fingertips. Now, it is also about creating the ecosystem where the developers and the DBAs can actually create, build, test, and deploy with ease and agility. Agility being one of the key components we have been concentrating on over the last year. And to do that, we're actually using container technology as a shipped vehicle to actually bring these capabilities forward. Now, when I talk about AI and the database and Db2, I would like to do it in the two separate pillars. The first of the pillars being Db2 being powered by AI. And those capabilities are kind of abstracted and hidden from actual users, like if I was to say DBAs and the developers or data scientists. They're kind of hidden because they're actually infused in the heart of the Db2 engine. Number one item on my list over here is about query optimization. As everybody knows, the cost-based query optimizer that is very mature in technology that's been there since the inception of Db2 has its benefits and it has its drawbacks. Now, what we've been looking at internally at IBM over the last year and a half, we've been looking at how machine learning can actually help when it comes to query optimization. And the number one use case that we've decided is that cardinality estimations, when it comes to selecting the right query optimal query access plan, are critical. We can be off, if we are off with a cardinality estimation when it comes to access, how many rows will be actually returned from a base table, we can be off by factors. And when that actually happens, this kind of bad decisions initially, when we're actually planning that query access plan, are actually propagated and can cause serious performance degradation. So if the right plan is selected, we can, let's say, use example, we can execute a query in a sub-second, and if the same query is, if a bad plan is selected, we wind up, in a matter of minutes, so serious performance degradation. So as the first phase, after extensive experimentation, we found that a trained machine learning model that is basically trained on the statistics that actually we generate in Db2 is providing much more accurate cardinality estimation. We've been expanding this work to add equality and range predicates, as well as joint conditions and expressions. So with the June release of Db2 11.5.4, because this will be a mod 4 that's being released, we will have additional enhancement to our tech preview for ML Optimizer, a feature that actually simplifies the administration, simplifies how you actually manage the optimizer, how you interact with the optimizer, and then provides superior cardinality estimations based on the machine learning algorithms that have been trained on Db2 statistical data. Martin, I'm actually not sure, but do we just talk through it, and if there's any questions, we address them at the end, or do we have a means of actually somebody asking questions between? Sorry, I should have asked that before, but I guess just for me to know if I should just keep going, or is there?
You keep going, and I'll just break in if there's a question in the queue. Right now, we don't have any, but okay, as they come up, if I see you catching a breath, you might hear me say, yes. Hey, okay, no worries.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, the second aspect when we look at how we can actually use machine learning is actually from perspective of workload management. Now, with adaptive workload management, that's going to be available for warehouse, column warehouse on-prem in the June release, we've added ability to infuse continuous learning approach based on actual execution of the queries. So while we're actually looking at the workload inside of Db2, and we start making assumptions how much CPU, RAM, and what will be the cost of running that query, and how we can best divide it and basically arrange that workload to optimally leverage the hardware and the resources in Db2, we now provide a feedback loop that we can actually learn from the actuals. This kind of retraining of the model and this feedback loop is actually a standard approach that's used in the machine learning, and we're using this kind of same methodology to improve the workload management in Db2. Additionally, with the June release, I'm excited to announce that we were able to bring in ML, machine learning model infrastructure via light GBM, so that's a light gradient boost model, into the Db2 engine. The intent is at this point, this will be hosted essentially a repository service for machine learning models. Now, this was driven through the ML Optimizer work. So in the first release, this will be essentially a repository for internal use models that are used for ML Optimizer. However, we envision this as opening up as a service that models can be actually trained, hosted, and managed within the Db2 engine. Now, the question is, why would that be important? Well, when you look at the data science use cases, machine learning models, they need data. There's simply no ML without data. Now, the data resiliency, security, and the governance around the data access itself, it's of critical importance. Another aspect that we're trying to address via this is actually performance of training such models. Now, when we look at gigabyte or 2 gigabytes of data, it's feasible to actually pull this data for a training perspective or scoring of machine learning models via JDBC. That might work. Obviously, there's the data security and resiliency issues, because you definitely don't want the customer data, your critical data, to wind up on some laptop of the data scientist where you lose the control of it. Now, with machine learning infrastructure for model training, repository, and hosting, we will be able to do those activities within the Db2 engine, where the data, not only the training, such training will be much more performant, but the data remains within the Db2 engine, so it's fully under control of the DBA. So those three pillars are just a number of basically approaches how we're using machine learning and AI within the Db2 engine to improve our workload management, to improve our query optimization, and how to enable the data scientists and the developers to actually speed up the training of the model training process, as well as ensure that the security remains paramount and your data is not shared and basically distributed in an unwanted fashion. So as I indicated, this is the first of the pillars when we talk about what does this mean for the database to be an AI ready or AI enabled. And the second pillar, which I would like to cover, is a database being built for AI. So we've had powered by AI. Now let's talk about what does this mean for the database to be built by AI. Well, let's start with those with application developers. Now, over the years, the standards, how basically the data is shared over the web, the languages that applications are actually using has changed drastically. There are standards like REST APIs that basically every modern application is using to access, retrieve, and make any data changes needed for the application. So I'm happy to say that with Db2 11.5.4, codename Nebula, we will be releasing in June full-fledged support in Db2 for REST APIs. Now, that support comes in two flavors. The first one is for static and dynamic SQL, meaning is that the application developer can actually submit that the SQL needed by the application to Db2 REST server. That server in turn will create the store procedure to wrap this SQL in, and it will return the REST API endpoint for the application to directly interact with. The interesting thing is that REST API endpoint is actually returning data in a JSON format, which can be directly consumed by the application, thus eliminating additional application code that would require the data return to be translated into JSON format, and so on and so forth. That REST API comes with the management API, so the application developers and DBAs can actually monitor what endpoints are created, how they're being leveraged. Obviously, we'll have this is backed by the audit capabilities, so you know who, what application, when, and how your data is being accessed. Outside of the static and dynamic SQL REST APIs, the Db2 administrative APIs, they've been used by DSM or Data Server Manager, or basically for our enterprise consoles, have been externalized via REST endpoints. What does this mean? Now, obviously, customers have choice to select, to use the console that comes with Db2 to monitor Db2 and basically interact with it from an administrative perspective. But with the REST APIs, we are exposing this matrix and allowing the customers to actually integrate it, integrate those APIs and this data in any kind of format or any custom dashboard that the customers might be using. So now we have a choice. Yes, you can use basically existing tools, visualization tools for administrating Db2, but now we give you a choice of actually consuming the data and integrating it into the dashboard of your own choosing. So that would be the REST APIs. So yes, modern frameworks, modern UI frameworks like Angular or Node.js or React, now that they know, they speak REST, and so does Db2 at this point. Another area I would like to actually concentrate on is with our Nebula June release, we're bringing forward a tech preview for Db2 Graph technology. Now, lots has been said. Now, does the graph technology really fit in the AI space? Well, some might argue yes, some might argue not. Yes, it is the distinct technology, but I did want to bring forward, as Db2 will now support basically graph technology, basically using Gremlin language with property paths. in a way that the data allows to be the data still resides in DB2, and the queries, graph-grammar queries, are actually being translated into Db2 dialect. Now, that actually provides not only faster access and excellent performance when accessing this data, but also simplifies the interactions and eliminates the need for removing data from your relational warehouse and actually warehouse or OLTP database, and basically doesn't force you to copy the data. Again, helps with the security and helps with the performance. Very similar use case as I was actually talking earlier about the value proposition of the ML infrastructure that we're building within an engine. Now we basically taking the same approach when we talk about the Db2 Graph. So in June, this will be a tech preview. It will be shared with a number of assets that basically how to integrate this and use it in applications. And then we're planning of GAing of this feature in a December on-prem release for Db2 11.5, I believe the mod 7 at the time. Another few items that I'm actually, when I'm talking about the building for AI, I would like to talk about is actually ability to create ML pipelines. So machine learning models, when the data scientists actually work on it, are actually a little bit more than just pulling the data and feeding it into some features, trying to train the model. In reality, the creation of the model, it's a process. You can think about it as the ETL pipeline, where the data is actually extracted, transformed, anonymized, and various, there's quite a few operations that actually cleanse and prepare the data for machine learning training. Traditionally, all this has been done on, on the laptops or basically in a software that's made for the machine learning basically development. And again, as in previously, the data had to be extracted from a database, and then all this permutations and the training would have to be done outside of the database engine. With the Db2 11.5.4 Nebula, we are bringing the capability for classification and regression models to actually push this whole ML pipeline processing into the Db2 engine. Additionally, we're bringing support for PythonUDF. And let me basically, well, what do we mean by the PythonUDF? Well, we found in the same, basically, with the same thought of bringing the machine learning closer to the engine, the whole processing, the scoring, or what's considered in the machine learning terms, inferencing of the model, bringing it as close to the engine as possible, we've built out a Python runtime that allows deployment of actual binary that's been created from the machine learning, the trained and created machine learning model. So that could be Pickle or MLlib, bringing this binary and actually installing it beside the Db2 engine, beside the installation of Db2 server, to actually limit the latency required for inferencing and ensure the security of your data. Now, not to forget about, since I've been actually going, reconfirming this is all about the developer ecosystem, I'm happy to say that at this point, Db2 provides 20+ drivers in all the native languages that your developers and data scientists are expected to use. So Go drivers, Python, Node.js, all this, and many, many more, all this are now available to actually create this ecosystem for the developers and the data scientists to be able to choose the language that they want to interact with, that they have the best tools for the projects that they need, and don't force them to go in with CLI and Java. Those times, we still support those times have actually passed, and Db2 is creating this ecosystem where the developers can choose the language and the tools of their choice, where the data scientists have ability to bring in machine learning models into the database engine, where business analysts can actually discover the hidden insights via Db2 Graph technology, where applications can interact directly with the Db2 engine via REST APIs with little to no changes to their code, since the REST APIs are actually communicating via JSON. And now, as one of the last aspects over here that I would like to touch upon is Db2 Data Virtualization. Now, as enterprises evolved over the decades, so did how we store the data, where we persist our data. Obviously, we're very familiar with the mainframes and RDBMS like Oracle, SQL Server, or Db2. But what has happened over the last decade or so, we've started looking on unstructured data and where best to store it. With that, the enterprise is heavily invested in a data lakes. So when we think about accessing the data, we need to ensure that there is a single interface, a single SQL engine that can interact with variety of RDBMS, with the data lakes, with the recent explosion of the object store and a true adoption of cloud, access to, let's say, S3 or cloud object storage from IBM or Azure Block Storage from Microsoft is also essential. And let's not forget that, some business analysts are still using spreadsheets. So when we talk about data virtualization and the true value proposition that it actually brings, it is a one-stop shop for all your data needs. Single query interface that actually allows you to query relational database, data in your object store, and Excel spreadsheet, and actually create a join between those, and use the single SQL from application to actually query and interact with all those data types. Now, for those don't want to get into deep into data virtualization, but it is built out on top of the Db2 well-known and Db2 Federation technology, Db2 Big SQL technology, as well as a queryplex. Now, I've said a lot, and I hope I have actually described this accurately, and then now you understand how we're taking Db2 and we're building this ecosystem for data scientists, application developers, to serve the needs for the enterprises that actually allow them to modernize their workloads, modernize their applications, and allow to use the open source and all the industry standards tooling to enable them to actually do the effective job. Now, with all that being said, I would like to play a little bit short video to actually show you what the art of possible when you're trying to put all those various things together.
The Db2 Assistant app will bring the power of Db2 directly to your mobile device. It can interact with the IBM Db2 Data Management Console to ask health-related questions about your database. For example, "Hey Siri, how is my database performing?"
Okay, requesting. In the last hour, there were 40 connections executing 5.6 million queries, which accessed 11.3 million rows. It took Db2 an average of under 1 second to process each query.
"Hey Siri, how is my database hardware?"
Okay, requesting. In the last hour, CPU use averaged 6%, and memory use averaged 57%. Database storage is using 65% of available space, while logs are using 1% of available space.
Db2 Assistant will also integrate with Db2 REST, so you can ask Siri questions and receive answers directly from your database. For example, "Hey Siri, what is my defect backlog?"
Okay, requesting. Db2 has a current defect backlog of 611.
We're not limited to just asking questions. Db2 REST can be used with recurring tasks, which is a feature of Db2 Assistant, to run queries on your database looking for certain criteria. Whenever the data changes and meets this criteria, Db2 REST will send out a push notification directly to your phone, alerting you of the change. For example, "It looks like our fraud detection results are available. Db2 has finished running the fraud detection machine learning model against the latest health insurance claims that have been filed and has identified 10 of those as being suspicious. Let's open the results and take a look." Using a combination of Db2 REST and Db2 Graph, we'll ask Db2 for the output from the machine learning model and then analyze one of the claims it's identified as suspicious. We'll start by opening the claims review notebook and importing the required Python modules for this task. We'll create a helper function for working with Db2 REST and one for Db2 Graph. We'll load the style sheets required for visualizations. Next, we'll ask Db2 REST to get us the output from the fraud detection results. Here, we can see it's identified claim 4377 as being the most suspicious. Let's set that as the claim we want to review. We'll create a connection to the Db2 Graph server, and we'll start our investigation by taking a look at previous claims that this person has filed and seeing if there's anything interesting. We'll parse the result set and generate the visualization. Here's the claim that triggered the suspicious activity. This is the policy holder for that claim, and here are the previous claims they filed in blue. What's very interesting about this is that for every claim that this person has filed, they visited a different doctor who worked for a different service provider. This is very suspicious behavior. Let's dig a little bit deeper by taking a look at the social connections of the policyholder. What other policyholders are directly or indirectly connected to this one? We'll create some functions for categorizing the risk score. We'll ask Db2 Graph for the information. We'll parse the result sets and generate the visualizations. Here we can see our policyholder is directly connected to two other high-risk policyholders. They are also indirectly connected to another high-risk policyholder through 3 degrees of separation. There's a very high probability that this is a fraudulent claim. The ease of this analysis was all made possible through the power of Db2. Using Db2 Assistant, we received a push notification that our fraud detection results were available. Using Db2 REST and Db2 Graph, we were able to quickly analyze those results and make a determination if this is a fraudulent claim.
Excellent. I hope that this short demo has actually, can be seen as a preview of what the art of possible is. Yes, we did use, actually, what you just saw, we did use REST APIs in Db2 to actually create a push notification. And we've created a Db2 Assistant app, which I'm not announcing yet, something we're working on the back end. But with all this technology that we're actually building out via REST, ML, infused, we now have abilities to actually build iOS and soon Android apps that will take Db2 administration to a totally different level. No longer you'll be needed to sit at, in front of your computer and a desk and worry what's going on with my database. You'll be able to set up common tasks and push notifications and actually ask Siri or Alexa, how is my deep database doing? All done in a secure and automated fashion. Now, so this was the AI pillar of this conversation. Now I would like to move as forewarned earlier. I did want to talk about two things. So the one was the AI, and I hope that this little talk has helped you to understand how infusing AI inside the database can benefit the RDBMS engine, and then how building the ecosystems for the developers and data scientists enables the enterprise to modernize their workloads, to enable their developers and data scientists to use the tools of their choice and push as much of the processing into the database engine, helping with any security, audit, and performance considerations. Now, the second aspect I want to talk about is about the hybrid cloud and modernization and containers. So now, Db2 has been supporting Dockerized containers for over 2+ years. We have our clouds, warehouses on cloud, running in a container format, in a Docker format. We have container-based technology in our IaaS appliances. So we're not new to this. However, with explosion of container technology, what has become evident to us that container orchestration plays a key role. And no longer we're only looking as Db2 as being individual service that is deployed, but we're looking at how we can actually simplify this and increase the agility and decrease the cost of ownership when it comes to managing containerized solution. And with that in mind, over the last year plus, we have been heavily investing in something we internally call the Db2U, or more like Db2 Universal Container, that has been built in the era of Kubernetes. It has been optimized for running on Kubernetes installations and primarily on a RedHat OpenShift. For those that may not be aware, RedHat OpenShift is de facto industry-leading Kubernetes enterprise secured Kubernetes orchestration platform. Now, when we look at this, we see we see essentially OpenShift as means to actually coming in and allow agile deployments and management of DB2 and other applications on every single cloud provider. So if you were to actually look at AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, or SoftLayer, you will find that each of those cloud providers has basically native support for Kubernetes and OpenShift installations. Now that becomes critical, especially in combination with the DB2 Common SQL engine. What this implies is that within a day or two, you could set up OpenShift cluster on any cloud provider and take the applications that you have, deploy OpenShift cluster, deploy DB2 on it. And when we talk about deployments of DB2, let's say on AWS and Azure, once the OpenShift is actually present there, we're not talking about days, we're talking about minutes. So it changes the whole paradigm of and all the perceptions that we've had about how long does it take for me to, to deploy another instance for my developer? How long does it take for me to actually shift my workloads, migrate my workloads to public clouds? Now, how long, what is the cost of ownership of hosting something and managing something like that? So with OpenShift and Kubernetes itself, and then the Db2U that's been created for this type of deployments, those tasks become not only easy, but actually allow you to decrease the cost of ownership and increase the time to value. Just to give you some numbers, well, you know what, how long, often questions that I've been asking, and you know what, I should have asked Martin about it to actually put it in a survey. How long do you think it takes to deploy DB2 MPP warehouse? Let's say 4 nodes. And I would be interested from experience from everybody on the call, how long would it take in the past? But right now we can do it via OpenShift under 5 minutes. Yes, the storage would have to be configured prior, OpenShift would have to be installed. But then when it comes to provisioning and deploying DB2, it is a 5-minute affair. Think about agility when your developers need to spin up and spin down the instances for their work and testing. Now, deploying a single container OLTP database, we're talking about the 2 minutes affair. Outside of the deployment itself, we actually redesign how we think and how we actually do the upgrades and a full life cycle management from DB2 perspective, that when we talk about backups, failure, recovery, scalability, resiliency, there has been tremendous amount of work that went in actually improving this. And how we do it is actually via something we call operators. So operator is a Kubernetes construct. And when you look at the OpenShift OCP, OpenShift Cloud Container Platform 4.3, you will find that this release is actually infused in operators that actually perform and standardize on those tasks. I'm happy to say with the June release, DB2 will support the phase 1 and phase 2 operators are ready, which will allow for this dynamic seamless installation as well as upgrade of the versions. For the October-November timeframe, we will complete operator phase 3, which means we will have a full operators for a full life cycle management, including the backup, recovery, failure for the DB2 containers. This should provide enterprises with much needed help when it comes to managing the instances, when it comes to shortening the time required for any kind of upgrade, patching, this kind of activities. And it will enable this kind of seamless ability for the developers to request the database instance and have it ready not in an hour or a day or two, but within the minutes. So with all this ecosystem that we're actually building out and the DB2 being created for that era, I believe that DB2 will be the choice for the enterprises whenever they think about modernizing their workloads, modernizing their applications. Whenever they think about moving applications to the container technology, it will become natural that DB2 is already there and is perfectly suited for whatever modernization and whatever hybrid cloud scenarios your enterprise is looking at. And as before, earlier when I talked about AI, I basically closed it up with a little video. I've also had development team to put little 3-minute video when it comes to what Db2U really is, and how does it play in a hybrid cloud world.
The common SQL engine of Db2 has been trusted with mission-critical data for over 25 years. Containerization of Db2, IBM's premier relational database, brings cloud simplicity and standardization regardless of where your data resides, and without compromising on service levels to help you on board with the journey to hybrid cloud and AI. The fast, easy-to-use, and scalable transactional or data warehouse can be deployed in just a few clicks. We offer a deployment experience integrated within Cloud Pak for Data, which is built upon RedHat OpenShift container platform. It infuses AI and modernizes how you collect, organize, and analyze data, all without being tied to rigid architectures. In this rich partner ecosystem, you'll have access to SQL, ETL, and BI, tools that you love. In addition, Db2 can also be deployed on your hybrid cloud natively on RedHat OpenShift, in which you'll have access to security compliant and enterprise level images. The Db2 engine container is deployed alongside an ecosystem of containers that provides core services, which include authentication, monitoring, and managing, all orchestrated via Kubernetes OpenShift platform. Since the Db2 instance home, database paths and other stateful information is saved onto a persistent storage, and the Db2 engine container can be recreated at will, which makes scaling, version updates, and recovery painless. Db2 supports an abundance of state-of-the-art storage technologies. A few include OpenShift Container Storage, IBM Spectrum Scale, and IBM Cloud File and Block Storage. A key metric cloud-native services are measured by is availability. Db2 provides automated, multi-layer detection and quick recovery. To support high availability and reliability in Db2, in addition to the Kubernetes OpenShift HA Foundation, IBM built a multi-tiered resilient design that includes automated intra-container recovery if the components within the container fail, in-place container recovery, and recovery of the service if the service hosting the containers encounter a system failure. A scalable database means your database can grow at the same pace as your business. Db2 Warehouse on Hybrid Cloud supports cloud-native scale-out to increase the number of compute resources on demand to complement your data growth. With Kubernetes' concept of replicas, the simple act of incrementing the number of Db2 engine pods will trigger automation to seamlessly reappropriate all the Db2 partitions amongst all engine pods, including the newly created ones. Online transaction processing databases, OLTP, are highly sensitive to any sort of downtime. A few minutes of outage can result in thousands of connectivity failures, resulting in immediate impact to businesses. Imagine downtime of an online banking portal in the middle of the day. Introducing Db2 High Availability Disaster Recovery in a Container. This setup allows for rapid failover, combined with transparent application reroute for the database services. Db2 HADR provides an active-passive transaction database configuration combined with failover automation logistics. The primary and standby Db2 database deployments can reside in the same or different data centers. Get started for free and launch your first deployment.
I, for one, get excited when I look at this. There has been tremendous amount of innovation that went into this work. This is something that when we started this work about a year ago, we came to this when we're looking at the containers with 2 or 3+ years experience in the container technology. And the choices that we made with Db2U were very precise, but allow us to do quite incredible things. The HADR and a container setup, it is an automated hands-off failover that's done in about 30 seconds. And basically recovery, scaling, MLN reappropriation, so horizontal and vertical scalings, all those operations, updates, upgrades, deployments, all this has been simplified, abstracted via basically Kubernetes and the container technologies infused with what we have with the technologies from IBM, and they create very unique experience. So yes, I do like to talk about Db2U as being this next generation cloud native or near cloud native solution that allows for the enterprises to uplift their workloads, modernize them, integrate it with different applications, and make them cloud ready and any hybrid cloud ready. Now, there's quite a few assets. We will be publishing more videos around the Db2U, and we're adding basically white papers. We're currently working with RedHat when it comes to performance analysis of Db2U working in AWS with RedHat OpenShift container storage. I'm happy to say that we find that Db2U, the container technology, one of my, oops, sorry, let me just step back. I got a little bit ahead of myself. One of the main questions when it comes to the container technologies is that, will I be able to get the same type of performance as I get on my on-prem installations? And the short answer, with the right hardware in AWS or Azure or soft layer, so on and so forth, short answer is yes. We've done extensive performance analysis, and then we find that Db2U on AWS, on OpenShift, backed by OCS, which is OpenShift Container Storage, gives us the same performance and a better resiliency than what we have ever seen on-prem. Okay, so way more announcements, much more documentation, basically videos and so on and so on, this type of assets about the Db2U and how we're progressing on this journey will be coming, and definitely quite a few announcements during our June Nebula GA. Now, I've mentioned the word Nebula quite a few times. Okay, so and I saw that the podcast is supposed to have some fun moments, so let me just stop a little bit before I go to my last slide and explain why would I actually use the word Nebula. Well, we've decided that the versioning of Db2, with the numbers that we've been going with 11.1, 11.5, 10.5, 11.1, 11.5, and the subsequent releases are a little bit like not descriptive enough. And with the amount of the new features and capabilities that actually we bring in with Db2 right now, it's kind of new face, AI enabled, AI ready, and a hybrid cloud enabled, we decided to start adding code names to each subsequent release that would be describing what this release has in it. What new features, what new capabilities would this release have? And considering that via Db2U, infused with AI and machine learning and new graph capabilities, Db2 becomes this nebulous database that go wherever the clients need, wherever your enterprise needs. Okay, so hence Db2 11.5.4, internal code name Nebula. Now we're looking at the new code names for basically when we come up with the subsequent releases on-prem. So do watch out for those. I hope you find that exciting as much as we do. Now, to close up the podcast, if you're following Db2, you probably heard, and if you're following IBM and a whole data story, you probably heard about the Cloud Pak for Data. Now, I want to use this opportunity to actually highlight how does Db2 and essentially how does Db2 and data virtualization fit in this whole ecosystem that actually encompasses everything from data warehousing, data collections, data virtualization, to organizing your data, which means essentially your security policies, so that's governance aspects of it, and then finally with the machine learning. Okay, so collect, organize, and analyze. And as per the chart over here, Db2 plays the critical role for application developers and data engineers in this whole ecosystem inside this platform, and is the building cornerstone when it comes to accessing and hosting the data. So while Db2 can run by itself, while Db2 can be deployed on any cloud provider via Kubernetes and OpenShift, Db2 also comes integrated into this platform that we call Cloud Pak for Data that creates the ecosystem where all the personas within an enterprise, so from app developers, data engineers, DBAs, data scientists, business users and analysts, data stewards, can essentially have this integrated environment where those services like Db2, like Watson Machine Learning, like UGNI from Governance Portfolio or Watson Knowledge Catalog, and many, many more, they coexist, they're tightly integrated, which also helps when, and are built upon those open source technologies like Kubernetes, like OpenShift. right? And they basically decrease the value of ownership. They simplify administration, they simplify deployment, they integrate the services together. And while as IBM, we often say, well, we know how to integrate our software, perhaps not always this was very, this was true. So software integration has been always a pain point, and it requires immense amount of effort. And I'm proud to say that with Cloud Pak for Data, I think we did it right. You can go seamlessly from deploying DB2 instance, loading your data, accessing your data lakes and object stores, and pushing this data via virtualized views into your governance catalog, when data steward can actually identify business glossaries and security policies, and then feeding it, posting it, basically publishing it into machine learning projects, where data scientists in turn can work on their machine learning model and leverage those virtualized views, those security policies. And instead of trying to figure out, where do I find my data, which table is it in, which data store is it in, well, they just shop for business terms. So with that, I would like to basically close off this little podcast. So I hope that I was able to demonstrate, at least partially, that DB2 is your next generation database. AI infused, AI ready, ready for the hybrid clouds, container not only enabled, but born in the area of the containers. Thank you very much, Martin. I think that will be it from myself.
Fantastic, Peter. We had some very good comments, not necessarily questions, although I can paraphrase one comment on DB2U into something where people are looking for more information on that topic. So if there's some way in the future we can have you back, or have one of your folks come back and talk more about that, that would be a wonderful thing to do.
Oh yeah, I'm very happy to do so. I would actually suggest that one of the DB2 architect, there is Lloyd Julian, who's been leading this mission over the last year. We have tons of assets we can share. We essentially already have runbooks, basically runbooks that show you, that actually allow you for the deployment. So again, with enterprise that already has an OpenShift Kubernetes cluster, I mean, you can have a DB2 up and running and testing your application, not in days, but in a matter of hours and minutes.
Perfect.
So I'm very happy. I'm very happy to coordinate. I will send you perhaps some additional content when it comes to DB2U. So perhaps we can put it on the Db2Night Show page as well.
Yeah, we have our replay blog, and we can put it up there for people to grab it. And certainly, awesome. You've piqued an awful lot of interest today. I think it's fantastic.
I appreciate it. Great.
Do this. So with that, we've got one final question. I'll have to take back control here so I can do my hostly duties. I'll make myself presenter again. The last thing I do at this point is to ask people our famous last question, which is, did you learn something today? I'm really not saying the answer is a big surprise to me or to you. I think you've done a job.
So while we wait for that, Martin, did you learn something today?
Yes, I always learn something when I listen to you, Peter.
Okay.
I'm in good company because 100% of our audience learned something today.
Wow, that's wonderful.
That's absolutely the way we like to see it. We like to provide good content. We've been doing this for a long time, but we are always anxious to make sure we continue to do a great job. And that's evidence that we're doing the right things. So with that, I think I have one final slide, which basically highlights again that DBI software makes this show possible. We thank them for their continued interest in having the show run. And for me as host, I always enjoy doing this. And, it's interesting doing both the LUW and Z side, as I work on both anyway. But once again, great show. Let me cue the music. We are pretty much on time. Look at that, right on 12 o'clock Eastern time in the North America. With that, we'll cue the music. Wish everybody a great weekend. I'll thank you one more time, Peter, for presenting. Have a great weekend. Look for the replay on our replay blog and on YouTube. And we'll see you next time in 2 weeks on the Db2 Night Show.
Thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone. Continue to be safe and do your social distancing, etc. Bye-bye.